Brian was a sullen, scrawny third grader who sat slumped in his seat, ignoring his cousin who sat at the table with him and any other students or teachers who happened to come by. If it's reading workshop time, he'll be reading, or at least making the motions of reading. If it's writing workshop time, he will be doing nothing. Truth be told, the most he ever wrote during a writing workshop was 25 words. I worried about this child because he seemed so angry and disconnected from the sort of life that we like to imagine that all 8-year-old children should have. My concerns were echoed by one of my volunteers. This volunteer was a natural listener with a social work background. I valued her skills in getting to know some of my harder-to-reach children. She worked one-on-one with Brian many Wednesdays, and even for her, he was tough. The real breakthrough came the day he told her he hated his mother. She hastily beckoned me over to begin to talk. We sat together listening to the vicious hatred that this child felt for his mother spew out of his mouth. As it turned out, Brian had good reason to hate his mother. She had abandoned him on and off during the short years of his life, when her drug habit overpowered all other instincts. Even when she was with him, she was not a loving, caring mother.
I was fortunate enough to have Rose in my third grade class last year. Rose is all little girl and a little bit tomboy. She had sandy brown hair, freckles. She wore braces most of the year, which she drew into pictures of herself. It was an exciting day when we finally came off. Rose had a kind, gentle way of talking to others, but would stand up for herself confidently if treated unfairly. It was hard to see her shed tears when someone hurt her feelings.
There were stand-ins for Brian, though. His grandmother took him in, fed him, clothed him, and loved him after her fashion. He also had 2 uncles and an aunt who supported him with his schoolwork. They took him on trips and to church, and they played with him. The volunteer told me that a young couple from her church was also working with him. She continued to see him at church on Sunday or involved with some mission activity. He appeared happier in this setting, but Brian remained a very troubled child who during his unmanageable periods alienated everyone around him, even those who cared.
Rose had trouble reading at the beginning of the year. She was below grade level. But she would listen intently to directions, and when given advice, she took it. I was worried she would not pass the state reading achievement test. This was a high-stakes test, and she knew it. It was a topic of discussion for most of the third grade year, from September, as we anticipated the practice test, to June, as we waited for results. Rose pep-talked herself and went to tutoring. She read and participated in discussions about books we shared. Rose did all she could to learn. She frequently commented, "I hope I pass."
I continued to work with Brian when he entered 4th grade. We had developed ways of dealing with each other. I'd let him read longer than the other students if he would make some attempt to write during 15 minutes of writing workshop. I recognized the exigencies of his life and tried to adjust my attitude toward him accordingly. But I don't think I truly accepted his hatred of his mother. How could any child have that kind of hate for his mother? However, I did not try to talk him out of it.
Rose came with the baggage that many of our kids come with. Abandoned by her father at a young age, her mom, aunts, and grandmother formed a close-knit circle around her. Rose's papa dropped her off daily at school, walking her all the way up to our 3rd floor and saying goodbye with a hug and a kiss. Deeply loved and cared for, Rose was protected from the pain of her father's rejection. I talked with her mother about this at one point, when her father was trying to get custody of her. After not being around for years, all of a sudden he wanted her. What an awful thing to happen, to tear her away from her supportive family. Fortunately, this did not happen.
In the late fall of that 4th grade year, Brian's mother's body was found in a field by the trash-burning power plant. She was one of several victims of a serial killer who was eventually found and convicted. Brian's hatred poured forth anew, and it was darker and stronger than before. Here was the final betrayal, death. This time, I sat with Brian and accepted his hatred. At the time of this writing, Brian continues to make little academic progress. His behavior continues to deteriorate along with his grades. His passage through middle school has been marked with removals and suspensions. A child like Brian reminds me of the limits of school.
Coming from such a supportive circle, Rose was a supportive member of our class. She was the one I could count on to be helpful to new students as they came into class throughout the year. She encouraged Banta, our new Bantu arrival, and helped her feel comfortable in class. When someone was lonely, she would ask them what was wrong. When someone needed help, she would offer her assistance. On Teacher Appreciation Day, a colleague and I grumbled in the office about how rare it was to receive a card or gift from a student. It was May, and we had a difficult year almost behind us. We both felt underappreciated. I felt undeserving, as I had struggled through the year. I went to my classroom to greet my students and began to take attendance in lunch count. I looked up to see Rose in front of me with a large bouquet of pink carnations. "Wow, those are beautiful, Rose. They're for you, Miss McManaman." I choked, as if I was trying to keep down the words I just exchanged in the office. "For me?" I asked incredulously. "Yeah, for Teacher Appreciation Day." That's how these kids are at Park Street. You work so hard to lift them up, and it becomes a reciprocal activity. Rose went from limited to advanced on the Ohio Reading Achievement Test that March. She increased her score by at least 40 points.